Hi, I'm Warren, and welcome back to this intermediate Power BI course. Okay, so what we're going to want to do now, we're going to start wanting to build our actual reporting. So the first thing we're going to need to look at, or the most logical point to start at, would be just to look at our sales totals, right? So if we go and have a look at our sales table, we have all of our transactions, and we have a quantity and a price. So our total sale per transaction, as per what the company we are working for has advised us, would be the quantity times the price. And it's always good to find out from your customer that you're doing the dashboarding and reporting for what their calculations are. Don't ever think you know what they're doing. Rather confirm and make sure that you're using the calculation that they want you to use. So they've told us when we did our session on their data that they calculate quantity times price gives them total sales. So how we can do that, we can go and create something called a measure. A measure is a calculated object or a formula that can be used against any one of our dimensions or against most of our dimensions. And I'll show you what I mean now. So how do we do that? We can go home. We want to create a new measure. You can either use this new measure button here. So if we click on that, it opens up a little formula window here. So this is where you can write your formula, and it's very similar to what you would do in, say, Excel or any other kind of analytical tool. We want to call it total sales. And total sales is going to be the quantity of sales times the price. Now what we can do, we want to be able to go through every row of our data and calculate the quantity times the price. And how we can do that is using a formula called sum x. So the function sum x. Now you can see there's sum x and there's sum. Sum would be used if you had, I'm going to go out of this for now. Say we were just summing up the column price. We just wanted to sum this entire column. We could use sum. And what sum would do, it would be just like in Excel, it would be a formula that would just give us a total for a column. But what we want to do, we want to go into this row, we want to multiply quantity by price and get an amount. Then go to this row, quantity times price. Then go to this row, quantity times price. And go through the entire table, always multiplying quantity by price. So we want to iterate through the table and repeat that calculation. So that's when you use sum x. Any function with an x at the end is an iterating function that iterates through a table and repeats the formula. Any one without the x just would give you a total for the column. So where we want the total quantity later, we're just going to sum the quantity column. There we can use sum. And where we want to do a calculation and repeat that calculation over the rows, we want to iterate it. We need to use an iterating function, and those are the ones with the x on the end. So if we go back here, you can see there's a little exclamation mark next to my total sales measure because we didn't finish it. Power BI doesn't know what to do, so it's given us a little error. So that's how you know that you have an error. But we want to use not sum, but sum x. So if we tab that, it tells us we need a table and we need an expression. So what table do we want to look at? We want to look at the sales table, right? We want to iterate through the sales table. And our expression is going to be, we want to take the sales table quantity and we want to multiply that by the sales table price. And that will give us our total sale. So we want to iterate sum x, we want to iterate through the sales table, and we want to apply this formula for every row. Take the quantity and multiply it by the price. We push enter. Now you can see there's nothing next to our measure. So what we can do if we just drag and drop that onto our canvas, it just gives us our total sales. Now, the great thing with measures, as I said to you, they can be applied to any dimension. So we could literally, let me delete that. I'm going to grab a table here. And I'm going to say I want product name by total sales. That gives us total sales by product. In our formula, we're not telling it here what we are analyzing it by, but because we're putting it in a table with product, it is giving us total sales by product. If we grab total sales by product category, it's giving us our total sales by product category. If we want to know total sales by store, we can add store name and we can click on total sales. So think of things like profitability. Any measure you create, you can apply to any one of your dimensions, as long as it makes logical sense. That's the beauty of having a star schema. We have all of these dimensions flowing into our transactional data. So when we create a measure on our transactional data, we can slice and dice it by all of our dimensions. We can do it by our date table too. So if we go here, we go to our date table. Our date table, we have quarter number. We can take total sales and we can see it by quarter. If we take week number, we can see it by week number. So that's the beauty of these measures. That's where the true power of Power BI lies, is in DAX, in the formula language and the ability to create measures. Now, you can see we clicked on our measure, new measure button, and it's just gone and put our total sales measure in our customer table. So that's not ideal. We would want our measures to be in their own table. So how can we do that? We can go here and we can click on enter data. So if we click on that enter data, Power BI gives us a new little table here. So we can call this table, I'm just going to call it underscore measures. The reason I put that underscore there is because I want it to be the very first table at the top. And we can click load. So there it's creating a table, and here you can see we have a table called measures, and it's got column 1, but there's nothing in this table. So now what we want to do, we want to click on our total sales measure, and here at the top it's gone to measure tools, and it's saying our total sales measure, the home table for that measure is customers. We don't want it to sit in customers, we want it to sit in our measures tables. All we do is we go and select measures. And now you can see we have total sales in our measures column. So it's a best practice to keep your measures in a separate table, and you might even have more than one measure table. You might have all your time-related measures in a time table and financial measures in a financial measure table. So it could get messy if you have them in your dimension tables or in your fact table. Best practice, keep them in a different table. We no longer need column 1. Because we created this table with no data, Power BI just created a column 1 to have something in the table. We can click on the 3 dots next to column 1 and we can delete from model. Because column 1 actually doesn't do anything. And here we have our measure with total sales. So that's how we can create a measure table. So now we want to create another measure, because one of our other objectives was to have the total quantity of transactions. So now we could either go new measure, or we can just click on our measure table and we can right click and go select new measure. And here we want total quantity. That's what the measure is going to be called. And what do we want to do with that? We want to sum, push tab. It's the column name we want to sum. So we want to go all the way down to sales. We want to sum quantity. And we close. We click enter. And now, because we didn't have to apply a calculation on every row, that we could just do as a straightforward sum and not have to do an iterating function like SUMX, where we went and applied a calculation to every row. Here we literally just summed a column. And here we can see if we want to do quantity by product name, we can do that. can go into a table here. Or we could do quantity by store. We can grab another table, grab store name, grab our total quantity. You can see quantity by store, 8,013, 8,013. So that's how we can do a simple, straightforward sum. So there we've got our quantity. Another requirement they wanted to know how many transactions the company had done. So how can we look at transactions? If we look at our sales table, every row in our sales table is a transaction. So that would be a transaction, that would be a transaction. So if we could count the number of rows in this table, that would be the number of transactions that the company has done. So how can we do that? We got our measure table, we click on measures, right click, new measure. And just a note, you might not be creating in the real world all your measures in one go. You might create sales today, work on a few visuals using sales, and then you come across a requirement for number of transactions, and then you would go and create the number of transactions measure. So it doesn't mean you're always going to create all your measures in one go. I'm just doing it to save a bit of time here. So this one here, we want number of transactions. How can we do that? We want to count our rows. Let's put in count and see what comes up. That was all our count options. There's a count X. If we wanted to iterate, that's AX, there's X. But what we want to do, we simply just want to count the rows in a table. So now it's prompting us to choose the table we want to count the rows. And we want to count the rows in our sales table. So we choose sales, close brackets, push enter. And we could go and we can grab our number of transactions and put it in a table. 2287. Again, we can throw in product category to see transactions by product category, etc. So there we've got our number of transactions. We also wanted to have an understanding of how many customers do we have. So let's have a look at how we can do that. So we go to our measure table, we create a new measure. And basically, if we wanted to know how many customers purchased, we would want to see the customer ID in the sales table. Because we might have a customer created in our customer table that has never purchased. So we would want to actually know how many customer IDs are unique in our sales table. Because those are the customers that have actually got a sales record against their name. So I'm going to call this distinct number of customers that purchased. So we want to know how many customers have actually purchased from us. And distinct means unique. That means if customer A has bought 3 times, we're not going to count it as 3 customers, we're going to count it as 1 customer. So we know we want to do distinct. So let's type in distinct and see what we get. There's distinct count, that could be one to use. But below it, here's one, distinct count, no blank. So we wouldn't want to count any blanks. If there were blanks in our data, there shouldn't be blanks, but you never know. So let's choose that one. And here, what column do we want to count? We want to go through and we want to count our customer ID in our sales table. Because for every sales transaction, we have a customer ID. Close that, push enter. And this now gives us a unique count of customers, 36. If we went and we counted the customers in our customer table, so let's just call this count of customer. I'm going to do another measure. Count of customer, master. Let's just call it that, customer, master. We could do the same thing. We could go distinct, count no blank, and we could count customer ID in our customer table. So those are customers that have been created in our customer master table. And these could be the same, but there might be a scenario where we create a customer and that customer has never bought. If we put that there, we can see 36 and 36. So in this case, they are the same, but in the real world, we might create a customer and that customer never buys from us. So they might be in our customer table, but not in our transaction table. So that's just two views on how we could look at customer data. Okay, another thing they wanted to know was the average sales. So what we can do, we can create something called a nested function or a branched measure. So what that means is we already have total sales here. So we don't need to go and recreate this logic every time. We can just use this measure. So I'm going to show you an example of how we can do this. So for now, I'm going to create average sales amount. I'm going to calculate it. I'm going to call this calc just to show you that I'm calculating it. And here, what do we want to do? We want to get the average. So I'm going to start typing average. And here we have average, average A, and average X. I know that I'm doing a calculation, so I need to go for the iterating option. And I want to go through my sales table. So I want to go through my sales table. And what do I want to do on my sales table? I want to go and say, I want the average of my total sales. Now, how did I get total sales before? I went to sales, I pick the quantity, I multiplied it by the sales table price. So here, before we did sum X, where we were getting the sum, here I'm doing average X. So it's going to go through each line item, calculate the sales, and it's going to give me the average. So we click on that. And that's all good and well. We can create a table. We can throw that into a table. There we go. That's our average sales amount. But when we did this, we went and we rewrote this entire calculation here. And this is a very basic calculation, but you might have much longer calculations that you don't want to rewrite. So we can go and do average sales amount, and we can do it slightly different. So I'm going to copy this, Control C to copy it, and I'm going to create a new measure. And I'm going to paste that same measure, but I'm just going to take out this calc at the end here. And instead of recalculating this, we already have that in a measure. And that measure is called our total sales measure. So what we can do measure branching, where we use a previous measure in a new calculation in a measure. So when you put a bracket, that infers that we're looking at a measure, and we can go and get our total sales measure, which is this one here. So all we're saying is, give us the average in our sales table and use it on total sales calculation. And if we do that, we can go and grab that and drop it in there, and we get the exact same total. And the reason for that is these are exactly the same. This one is just using a measure within a measure, and this one is going and calculating the total sales from scratch. So you could choose either one. Okay. What else we wanted to know is we wanted to know what is the average spend per transaction. That was one of the questions the business wanted to know. Average spend per transaction. And here we know we want to get an average, but how can we get an average? We can find out the average spend per transaction by dividing the total sales by the number of transactions, because that would give us an average spend per transaction. So that would be one way of doing it. So if we start typing divide, it brings up the divide function. We can push on tab. We need a numerator, a denominator, and an alternate result. So if this doesn't work, what can we put in there? So what do we want to divide by? We want to divide our total sales. So again, we have a total sales measure. So we could go and do the SumX formula here that we've done before, but we already have it. So we just put in our bracket and we go total sales. We want to divide that by our number of transactions, which we already have. We have number of transactions. So again, we go here, number of transactions. And if that doesn't work, we just want to put through a 0. And there we have our average spend per transaction, which is the same as our average sales amount. It's just different ways of looking at it. But there we have our measures for that. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Maybe what I can do, just as a tip, I can show you a brief example. We're not going to use filter in this course. That'll be in the next course, which will be an introduction to DAX, to intermediate DAX. But I'm just going to give you a quick sneak peek of how filter works. So say we only wanted to look at our clothing category, not at all of our product categories, only clothing. So we could go here and say total sales for clothing, because we only want to look at clothing. We're not going to use this in our current model. This is just a sneak peek. How we could do that, we could use something called calculate. So calculate is a very powerful function. How it works, you can put in your expression, and then it allows you in the second argument to do filters, and you can do multiple filters. So we want total sales for clothing. So if we had to just say what we want to calculate total sales. So we've got calculate. We're going to open up our total sales, and we want to filter. So we've got a filter function there. We can tab on that. What do we want to filter? We want to filter a table. What table do we want to filter? We want to look at a specific product. So we want to go to our product table, and we look at products where the product category, so I want to go into product category, is equal to, and because it's going to be a text, we need to put those in, and we're going to type in clothing. The DAX, it often helps to just say exactly what you're wanting to do and logically try and type out what you want to do. So normally we would do this on separate lines to make it a bit more readable. So if you hold down Shift and you push Enter, that moves DAX down the line. So here we want to look at, calculate our total sales. We want to filter products where product category is equal to clothing. If we push Enter, let's see what we get. So I'm going to create a table, and I'm going to drop this in. Clothing is that amount there. Let's double check it. We create another table. We're going to grab our product category, and we're going to grab our total sales. And you can see clothing is 277,6450, 277,6450. So that's just a way of using filter to get a specific value. So that's just a little sneak peek on a bit more advanced DAX. But for now, I think we have the measures we need to create our visuals. So in the next video, we'll start looking at creating our visuals. Hope you're having fun so far, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.